A charming Irishman, a beautiful nanny turned wife, and a retired FBI agent. Sounds like the start of a love story, right? Wrong. On a summer night in 2015, Jason Corbett was found bludgeoned to death in his own North Carolina bedroom. A baseball bat, a paving brick, and a story of self-defense that would shock two nations. Was it protection or premeditation? Secrets, betrayal, and a chilling 911 call that changed everything. This is the case of Jason Corbett, where family loyalty turned fatal. Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of A Brush with Death. I am your host, Miss Casey Hunalay, and in this series, I sit down, I tell you a true crime story, and I paint you a pretty picture at the same time. So if you love true crime and you love art, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That way you will never miss one of my terrible stories. So before we get into the case, introduce you to our special guest, which, guys, I'm running out of artwork. So I might change up the background. Who knows? If you have a suggestion of what I should do, leave it down in the comments. But yeah, I'm running out of pieces. So this is Viva La Bam that I did a few years ago for a skateboarding show. So all you 90s, 2000s kids remember Viva La Bam. It was like one of my favorite TV shows. Anyway, so say hi to Bam and his friends back there. Hey, Bam. So what case are we covering today? We are talking about the brutal murder of Jason Corbett and all the salacious details that go with it. And this case was recently in headlines for the appeal that went through and the outrage that followed. So let's get into it. So who was Jason? I couldn't find too much on his background, but what we do know is he was an Irish businessman. He had lost his wife, unfortunately, his wife Margaret, or Mags Fitzpatrick, to an asthma attack in 2006. That's terrifying. I have asthma. Where's my inhaler? I don't even know. That's terrifying and so sad. So he unfortunately lost his partner in 2006. And then in 2008, he hired Molly Martens. I think it's Martens. There's a glare on my screen. Molly Martens, Knoxville, Tennessee native, as an au pair for his two young children, Jack and Sarah, who were around 3 and 1 at the time. Now, if you don't know what an au pair is, it's basically like a live-in nanny, usually like a young woman from another country comes in and you sponsor her to come in and then she watches your kids and, gets paid for it and that kind of thing. So, Jason and Molly actually later married and relocated to North Carolina. So I couldn't find a ton about their relationship either, as far as like, how all that went down, right? But friends and family said that Jack and Sarah, the two children, when they were very young, were very fond of Molly at first. Molly appeared nurturing, especially to the younger child, Sarah, who was just a toddler when Molly entered their lives. So it seems like this is kind of like a little fairy tale, right? The husband loses his wife, he hires this young, beautiful au pair to come over and watch his children, and then they bond, and then, they start their own lives together, which sounds lovely, right? But it doesn't end that way. Ends really terribly. So, like I said, Molly and Jason did get married and relocated to North Carolina. It was said that Molly started to act like the children's real mother. Now, like, these situations are so sensitive, right? Like, I think if all parties like are okay with it. I think that's wonderful and beautiful, but Jason was not into Molly replacing Margaret. So he definitely wanted to preserve the memory of the children's biological mother, and but she ended up like pressuring Jason into letting her adopt the kids officially, and he flat out refused, which I think he has every right to do, right? He said, yeah, like he said, he, didn't want to erase the mother's legacy. And Jason's family later testified that Molly became increasingly possessive of the children and resentful of Jason's authority over them. So we are starting to see some cracks in this relationship, right? So reports of tension between Jason and Molly emerge, and friends note that Jason was considering divorcing Molly and returning to Ireland with his children. So things are not good in this household, right? I'm not sure how much the children saw as far as like tension between Jason and Molly. They do testify later in the trial, mostly about her like mothering techniques, right? But as far as like any physical violence or anything like that, I don't think they saw anything. And honestly, I don't think there was anything. I think there was just some high tension between Jason and Molly, and that was kind of the extent of it. And then it just turned really bad really quickly. So a few years pass and tensions building, right? And they're just getting more and more resentful of each other. And finally we get to the fateful night, right? So August 2nd, 2015, so about 10 years ago, Jason's body is found. So Jason's body was discovered in the master bedroom of his home in Walberg, North Carolina. Jason was found in his pajamas, suggesting he had been sleeping or getting ready for bed when he was attacked. His body was on the floor, close to the bed, motionless, bloodied, and surrounded by large pools of blood. So Molly's father, Thomas Martens, made the 911 call, but investigators and forensic linguists found his behavior very unusual, to say the least, for a man supposedly acting in a very frantic self-defense manner, right? So the timing of the call, so Thomas and Molly waited several minutes after Jason was incapacitated before calling 911. So there was definitely not an immediate response to this. And then the gap between the assault and the call was very suspicious. So Thomas sounded really surprisingly calm, right? And his speech was clear, orderly, and rehearsed. Not panicked at all. Remember, he is a retired FBI agent. So you could chalk it up to somebody who just doesn't panic, right? I don't know, but, expecting after someone, he does admit that he killed Jason. And you would expect someone that admits to killing someone to be a little bit more like adrenaline rush, life or death kind of struggle, like to be just panicked or at least show some kind of emotion, right? But no, there was none of that. So Jason had suffered at least 10 to 12 separate blunt force trauma blows to the head. Injuries included a fractured skull and brain bleeding and deep lacerations. So he was brutalized. The medical examiner testified that many of the blows were inflicted while Jason was incapacitated. So he was already out when these blows are made. So there's not a lot of, there's little to no defense wounds is what I'm saying. So meaning he was lying down unconscious or dying during much of the beating. So what was found at the scene, there was a Louisville Slugger baseball bat stained heavily with blood, and a concrete paving brick, which is used for like a garden path or something, right? Also bloodied and in the bedroom. Both were found near Jason's body, and there was very little evidence of defense wounds, like I said. So on Jason's arms and hands, this suggested he was either asleep, drugged, or overwhelmed so quickly that he couldn't defend himself. So one thing I did want to mention before we move on is there was a toxicology test done on him as well, and the results were inconclusive. But Jason's family did go on record saying that they think that he was sedated before this, so he was more easily overpowered. So, it's just like, I say this in every video where there's just like a horrible way to die. Like, is there any good way to die? Maybe falling asleep in your bed, not getting bludgeoned. I don't know. So, like I said, Thomas did make the call, and it seemed like he was setting up the narrative that he had to kill Jason in self-defense. So he picks up the phone and immediately says, "We need help. He was choking my daughter." That's his first thing that he says, right? So he repeated the choking narrative multiple times without prompting, almost as if he was, preemptively defending himself of like what he did, right? So instead of begging for medical help for Jason, which, if you put yourself in that situation, if you had just defended yourself or your daughter or your loved one against someone who was a part of your family, you would be alarmed, I think, but if if that is a part of your family, you'd want them to seek medical attention as well, right? If you almost murdered this person, right? So, in self-defense, right? So instead of begging for medical help for Jason, the emphasis was justifying the assault. So they just kept going, Thomas, about, he was choking my daughter. No clear attempt of CPR or life-saving measures were reported during the call. So the dispatcher later said that, that Thomas seemed strangely composed, like I said, and that Molly barely spoke during the call. So what that says to me is like, okay, he's retired FBI. He's like, let me handle this. I'm going to make sure we don't say anything incriminating. And all I'm going to say is that I was defending you and it was self-defense, right? Building up a case for self-defense, right? So that's what that call tells me. But let me know what you guys think. So in December of 2015, so just a few months later after Jason's death, Molly and Thomas are indicted on second-degree murder and voluntary manslaughter. So, yeah, well, I mean, rightfully so. I think they planned this, but I want to know what you guys think. And then in January of the next year, 2016, Molly and Thomas were charged with second-degree murder and voluntary manslaughter. And they were released on bond, $200,000 bail each, with conditions including surrendering their passports and avoiding contact with Jason's children, which, thank goodness. So the trial began in 2017. The prosecution alleged that there was premeditation involved to get that second-degree murder. Actually, isn't first-degree murder the one with premeditation, and second-degree murder is not the premeditation one? So why? I have to look that up, because I think, let me know if I'm wrong, right? First-degree murder, premeditation. Second-degree murder, no premeditation, like heat of the moment kind of thing, right? Yeah. While the defense claims Jason was abusive and they acted in self-defense, which, okay, we'll talk about it. Defense attorneys painted Jason as a violent man, yet friends and family described him as calm and devoted, and a very devoted father as well. So there was alleged abuse claims. Molly and her father, Thomas, claimed Jason was physically abusive towards Molly throughout their marriage. They alleged that Molly was terrified of Jason and that she had confided in Thomas multiple times about the supposed abuse. Molly reportedly told friends and family she was afraid Jason would kill her, though there was no police reports, no medical records, or third-party witnesses besides Thomas confirming any type of abuse. So it doesn't mean that it didn't happen, right? But the lack of evidence, especially reporting on the police standpoint, makes me a little suspicious, right? But again, some of us have never been in those type of situations. Sometimes it's terrifying to go to the police and get it on record, right? So maybe it did happen, I don't know, but there is no reports of abuse from Jason. So the story of the murder from Thomas's point of view. So Tom said that he was staying overnight at the Corbett house to keep an eye on Molly, which I don't know how I feel about that, right? If you're having marital problems and your father-in-law stays over, I would feel, as the other party, I would feel threatened by that, right? So probably Jason was already on edge if Thomas was around. And according to Tom's version, or Thomas, I keep going in between Tom and Thomas. It's the same version. So according to Thomas's version, he had heard a commotion upstairs, convenient, and a loud argument and thuds. He claimed he went to the bedroom and found Jason choking Molly, pinning her to the bed, possibly trying to kill her. Thomas said he grabbed a baseball bat, which was a gift from Jason to his children, by the way, and hit Jason to protect Molly. Now, what I want to know is, if he was trying to choke Molly, is there any physical evidence of that? Does Molly have any bruises or anything? Interesting. They said that Jason wouldn't stop attacking even after being hit. Thomas claimed he kept striking Jason until he was subdued because he feared Jason would kill both of them. Molly said she grabbed a brick, which... When did you get a brick? Which she said she kept under the bed for protection. Again, you keep a brick under your bed for protection? There's got to be better items. Knife, a nightstick, an umbrella, I don't know. And she used that to strike Jason. So they're both going at it, which, wow. The fact that the brick was under the bed raised a lot of serious doubts about premeditation. But again, I don't know if I necessarily believe that it was already under there. Maybe she went and grabbed it. I don't know. So after that, they called 911 and told the dispatcher that it was self-defense, like I said earlier. And during the call, they immediately said, "We need help. He was choking my daughter," blah, blah, blah. So the problems with the self-defense claim, let's point out the discrepancies. So despite their self-defense story, there was huge problems with their story. Jason's injuries were catastrophic for self-defense. He suffered at least 12 separate blows to the head, most while he was on the ground, which, oh God. Blood splatter evidence indicated that Jason was stationary and low to the ground during most of the beating, not standing and not fighting. The 911 call sounded suspiciously scripted, according to some forensic linguists who analyzed it, and the neighbors testified that they heard no yelling, no fighting before the incident, and suggested no real altercation, which, Yeah, the number one indicator for not self-defense to me is how brutal was the attack, right? If it's in self-defense, you you shoot or you stab or you beat to subdue, and then that's it, right? There shouldn't be any kind of like indication of overkill or anything like that. But with Jason's case, there was definitely overkill in this instance. So that shows me that there was rage there and not necessarily self-defense. So, like I mentioned earlier, there was no real like self-defense wounds on Jason's body. So Jason's hands and arms showed very few injuries. In genuine fights for life, victims usually have defensive wounds, like extensive defensive wounds, including like bruises, scratches, broken fingers, and Jason barely had any of that, suggesting that he couldn't defend himself. He was possibly asleep, or maybe stunned or drugged, or, he was very quickly incapacitated, if that. So yeah, that's another indication of not self-defense, right? If that person was not even awake at the time, right? And then we have the weapons, right? So a baseball bat and a concrete paving brick were recovered near the body, and both very bloodstained. The brick was suspicious because it had been found under the bed, implying pre-positioning or potential violence. So yeah, I don't really get what the brick was doing there. If she had placed it under the bed beforehand, which would indicate premeditation, or if she ran out to get the brick. Like, I don't really, the brick just doesn't doesn't fit anywhere for me, right? And then again, let's revisit the 911 call. This was presented in court as well. His tone was very calm, controlled, and preemptively defensive, right? So he was repeating the claims that Jason was choking Molly, and it sounded very scripted, right? And again, no attempt at performing CPR or trying to assist Jason, which, again, like, I've never been in one of these situations before, right? But, if it was two family members going at it, right, and I had to defend one, and I incapacitated one, I would hope that I would want to try to help that person, right? And if they stop breathing or whatever, that I would try to save their life as well. But none of that happened in Jason's case, and they just let him die. So another piece of evidence that they presented in court was the motivation and the relationship evidence. So there was a lot of tension and divorce plans kind of going on, right? Jason had told some of his friends that he was considering moving back to Ireland and divorcing Molly with his children, right? And Jason's refusal to let Molly adopt the children was a very major sore point in the relationship, right? And then there's Thomas, right? Multiple witnesses testified that Thomas distrusted and disliked Jason from the jump, which, yikes. Thomas allegedly told others he was concerned for Molly and might take action if necessary, which, premeditation? I don't know. Jason's death would allow Molly to potentially retain custody of Jack and Sarah, the two children. She had grown attached to them and but had no legal rights over them since she never legally adopted them. So that was one big indicator for motive, is the children, right? And then there is the children's testimony and the psychological reports. So after Jason's death, Jack and Sarah Corbett told psychologists that Molly was physically and emotionally abusive towards them, so they turned on her real quick, and that they were afraid of her. They missed their real mother and wanted to stay with Jason's family, not Molly. They severely undercut Molly's claims that she was a loving mother figure defending herself from an abuser. So again, I'm really glad, like, it sucks that the children have to go through so much trauma, right? Like, they lose their mother and now they lose their father, like, and they're being interviewed, right, about their father's death and just reopening those wounds over and over and over again. But I'm really glad that they were able to, freely speak about the relationship and they weren't scared to stand up to Molly, right? And they were protected and right. And they do have a good ending. So the children are with Jason's family. So let me just tell you up front, it does end well for them. So, but anyways, man, like the trauma that they had to go through to get there. I really hope that they're doing well. And it seems like they are, right? It seems like they're moving on and trying to live, the best life that they can. So I did find a really good quote from the prosecutor during the case, or at the end of the case, under the trial. They said, "This was not an act of defense. This was an act of domination, of elimination." Which, yeah, like they argued it was a planned killing, fueled by a blend of resentment, control, emotional dependency, and a calculated effort to seize control of Jason's children and the legacy. Yeah, when it comes to the premeditation, like maybe they set those things up so when the opportunity presented itself, they could kill Jason. So I guess, yes, premeditation, but to what extent? I don't know. So August 9th, 2017, so almost 2 years after his death, after a 5-week trial, both Molly and Thomas were found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 20 to 25 years in prison. Jurors rejected the self-defense claim, noting the excessive number of blows and lack of immediate 911 call and medical attention. So, after their conviction, Molly and Thomas's family aggressively defended Molly online, clashing with Jason's Irish family in a very public and bitter media war, which, like, I guess, like, I've never had a family member in this situation, but a man died, so maybe she got what she deserved and just let her go do her sentence, dude. But maybe they honestly thought she didn't do it. I don't know. Families turn a blind eye all the time, and it's terrible, right? But we love a family that does the right thing, but I don't think this family did. So. Anyways, so in 2018, this is when their appeals launched. The defense argued that critical evidence supported self-defense claims were excluded, including prior allegations of abuse. The defense wanted to introduce testimonies and statements about Jason's alleged abusive behavior, both toward Molly and allegedly his first wife, Margaret. So they had witnesses lined up who would testify about that, but they never included it during trial. So they also had secondary hand testimony implying that Margaret may have been afraid of Jason before her death, though there was zero physical evidence of this. So the reason that they excluded this too was the judge ruled that these allegations were too remote, too speculative, and prejudicial without clear supporting evidence, which I agree. The court said it would confuse the jury and distract from the facts of Jason's death, which, yeah. The appeal also said that psychological evaluations of Molly were not included as well. So Molly underwent psychological assessments that suggested she was genuinely believed that she was in an abusive relationship. Her defense argued that these mental health evaluations could have helped explain why she believed she needed to act in self-defense, even if no direct proof of abuse had existed. The reason why they excluded this in the first place was that the judge said that the evaluations were self-serving, which they are, and conducted after the killing and had very little probative, I think that's how you say probative value, which, again, like, it seemed like they were like pretty self-serving, right? And two, they were done by her team as well. So that's why he chose to exclude them from the original trial. Another thing that the appeal statement said that the statements from the children were excluded as well. So there were early interviews with the Corbett children that defense claims showed Jason was sometimes harsh or short-tempered. These interviews also allegedly indicated that the children did not always feel entirely safe with Jason. But the court ruled these statements were really inconsistent and actually just hearsay, and determined that they were not credible enough to be included with the trial. And there was other like official statements from the children that were included. So again, I agree with excluding them in the first place. But so these items were included in the appeals, and in February 2020, the convictions were overturned. Yeah. The North Carolina Court of Appeals reversed the convictions, citing trial errors and excluded evidence. And in March 12, 2021, a retrial was ordered. The North Carolina Supreme Court upheld the decision for a retrial, agreeing that the defendant's ability to present a full defense was unfairly hindered. You know, I don't know how you guys feel about this, right? Like, it's pretty obvious from the evidence, even the excluded evidence, that they still murdered him, premeditated or not. They still did it, and they still deserve to serve their sentences, right? But do they deserve a retrial? Like, I don't think so. But the Supreme Court said that they did. So, and there was a lot of outrage from this, right? So October 30th, 2023, so just a few years ago, facing a retrial, Molly and Thomas Martens accepted a plea deal, pleading guilty to voluntary manslaughter. They were sentenced to 51 to 74 months in prison with credit for time already served. 74 months? How many years is that? Like, for killing someone and that brutally, that's how long you get to serve? Shoot, man. So, June 6, 2024, so just last year, both Molly and Thomas were released after serving approximately 4 years and 3 months in prison. They began a 12-month post-release supervision period in Tennessee with conditions including no contact with Jason's children. Obviously, this sparked huge public outrage, especially in Ireland. Jason's family describes the justice system as having failed miserably. His children remain in custody of Jason's sister, Tracey Lynch, who had fought a grueling legal battle for them. So at least the children are with his family, right? But yeah, like, the family must be completely devastated after they're just released after only 4 years in prison. I can't even imagine. So, I know that this could feel really upsetting, and it is, right? You know, at least we can kind of look to the good parts of this story, which I think is the children, right? The children are with who they're supposed to be with and with Jason's family, but I think it's easy for us to focus on the bad, right, and not look at the good. But I did write a little paragraph that I hope is, you know, encouraging for you, even when we see such an injustice happen, right? So, in the wake of an unimaginable tragedy, it's easy to feel swallowed by the darkness and to believe that evil wins when justice fails, right? So, but the story of Jason Corbett is not just about violence or betrayal. It's about a father with endearing love for his children and a family's unwavering fight for truth, and two brave children who refused to forget who their real parents were. Jason's voice was silenced, but his story wasn't. His family, especially his sister Tracey, who has the children, turned pain into purpose, crossing oceans, battling courtrooms, and enduring heartbreak to protect what Jason loved the most, his children. This case reminds us that justice isn't always clean or complete, but dignity, love, and legacy can still survive the worst kind of injustice. In the end, truth has a way of rising, and so does courage. So, yeah, this case is pretty discouraging as far as like the justice system goes. But let's try to focus on the positive, right? Jason seemed like a very loving and devoted father, and his children proved that, right? They testified and stood up to Molly and eventually were given to the person that they should have been all along, which was, Jason's sister. So like always, I like to end in an inspirational quote, and today we have one from Ellie Weissel, who is a Holocaust survivor. She said, "There may be times when we are powerless to prevent injustice, but there must never be a time when we fail to protest." Like I said earlier, Jason's sister, Tracey, embodies this statement. She used her voice to stand for her brother and his children when the system fell short, and she prevailed. She got those kids, and they are living a good life with her and trying to move on, right? So I hope that you guys find that encouraging. Even when it seems like evil and injustice are all around us, try to focus on the good and work through it. That's the only thing that we can really do is just keep going, right? And keep doing the next right thing, right? That's what I always, whenever I go through like trials and tribulations of this life, right? I always just tell myself, just do the next right thing, right? And that's all you can do. So I hope that you guys feel encouraged from this storytelling, right? And without further ado, let's look at the finished piece. Oh! So Jason was from Ireland, and I've been to Ireland before. I have Irish roots as well. And if you've never been, you'd be really surprised at like how green it is, and it just smells green too. It smells like the earth in a good way, right? So I thought I'd do a little Irish sheepy here, and he's looking good. He's looking a little chubby. He's looking well fed and adorable. So I hope that you like this, Jason. I hope it speaks to your Irish roots. And yeah, we'll put it with the other ones. So cute. All right, guys. Well, I hope that you liked the case today as much as I like putting them together. And don't forget to subscribe. That way you won't miss the next, episode or whatever I decide to do. And I hope that, go out there, be good people, treat everyone with kindness, and I will see you guys in the next episode.